starters is I'm just going to show you a game that's not exactly Queen's Gambit, but it's very close, and it's the same kind of ideas of what happens when black gives up a little bit of central control. It can work out okay for black, but he has to be very careful. So we'll start off with the game there. I'm just trying to see if I'm already screen sharing here or not. I've got a small version of your guys' screens here. So let me bring it up. Okay, so you guys can see the board in front of you now. Thank you, Ricky. So you guys are going to find I'll call on you sometimes by name to answer questions because I like the students to all kind of be involved. The way you get better is by asking questions or trying to answer questions, and don't worry about being right or wrong. It's how we learn, is just trying out ideas, okay? So I'm going to encourage you guys to answer questions as much as possible. So this game, as you can see from the board, was from the Canadian Open Championship that happened in Edmonton in the year 2000. And I was playing a young junior player named Roman Giganshin, who eventually became about a 2350 player, very strong. And even at that time, he was ranked higher than me. But it was a very interesting game anyways. So we're just going to quickly run through it to see some of the ideas of what happens in what are called closed positions. I don't know if Roy used that term with you, but D4 openings are considered what they call the closed openings, and E4 openings for white are considered open games. So that's often the way the terms are used. And that partly has to do with the way the pawn structure in a D4, D5 game will tend to be, the game will open up more slowly. It can still be very dangerous, and many great attacking players like Garry Kasparov, for example, who was world champion for 10 years, used D4 most of his life, even though he was very much an attacking player. So let's just have a look at the way this opening started. Now, who can tell me, this isn't exactly Queen's Gambit. Queen's Gambit would normally be the move E6. Can anyone tell me what C6 is called as a defense for black? Anyone want to try this? Luke? Any idea? Anyone else? Who's heard of the Slav defense? I can't see you guys all at once, so feel free to speak up. I'm kind of scrolling through your names here.
I haven't heard of it.
Say again?
I haven't heard of the defense.
Okay, so this is called the Slav
Isn't it
defense.
just down in the corner of the screen? It's a slave defense.
Okay, so sometimes this will transpose back into a Queen's Gambit if black still plays E6 at some point. In this game, he doesn't. So let's just see how it plays out. So normal development for both sides, getting their knights into the game. And white's going to continue offering black to take this C4 pawn. And in exchange for that, white will get more central control. So in that sense, it's a true gambit, right? When we use the term gambit, we mean we're giving up something to gain something else. So black takes the pawn and white plays E4. And black says, I don't care how ugly it looks, but I'm going to hold on to my pawn no matter what. Okay, so black is going to gain some space on the queen side, but white has more control in the center of the board. If you guys were to imagine if white did nothing now, if white just made a move that didn't change anything, black could push the B5 pawn, push it to B4, attacking the knight. And when it moved, this very important central pawn on E4 would fall. So white first is the first one to push past and try to gain some space. Knight comes up into the middle of the board. Do you think it would be a good idea for white to trade the knights, or should white try not to trade the knights? Does someone want to try to answer that question? I'm going to ask for somebody other than Ricky this time because I need more of you guys to speak up, and if I can get someone to maybe offer an opinion, do you think we should take the knight on d5, or do you think we should keep the knights on the board? And maybe give me a reason why.
You can see Nathan raise the hand, so you can see the hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just speak up, guys, and then maybe tell me what your name is when you speak up, because if I can't see you guys, I don't know who's speaking. Oh, okay. So when I see the hand, does that tell me who it is?
Yeah, that means Nathan wants to talk.
Okay, Nathan, go ahead. Thank you.
I think you should keep the knight.
Okay. Give me a reason, give me at least one reason anyways, why we want to keep the knights and not trade them on that d5 square, Nathan.
So that you can keep your center strong.
Yeah, that's right. Because for example, if I took the knight on d5 and black took back with the pawn, we'll just do this as a little note here. Black suddenly has a pretty strong center himself, right? And he's still a pawn up, and we're never ever going to be able to win his pawn back now. Does that make sense? So it's in white's best interest to not trade off the pawns. So what I do is I try to break up this little center of pawns here. I try to break it up with the move a4. And if black tries to push past with a move like b4, then he's going to forever have trouble holding on to this c4 pawn here. It becomes very, very weak. So I'll give you an example here. Here black played e6, but if he had tried, if he had tried instead to push past with the pawn, my own knight comes up into the center. And even though these pawns look kind of strong side by side, I think it's easy to see that it's very difficult to hold on to that c4 pawn that's being attacked by the bishop now. And white has very strong pieces in the middle of the board. So he wisely blocks up this center area and prepares the rest of his development. I take on b5. Now he shouldn't take back because my knight would just take it. So this is what we call an in-between move. I'm told that you guys are varying strengths up to about maybe 1400 levels. So many of you would have heard of the idea of an in-between move, but it's a move where you know you want to take this, but you have to play something first. So knight takes knight hits the queen here. And when I take back, now black can safely take here. So black is still up a pawn, but white has more control of the center, and black has to decide how to develop his pieces. So white will play very aggressively now, which in a lot of Queen's Gambit openings, when there's still a pawn on d5, white can't play that aggressively, but here white is willing to take some chances. So right away I go forward and I'm getting my knight right near black's king. If you were to imagine if it were white's move now instead of black's, my queen could come to this square. And can you guys see the double threat that exists if I'm allowed to play this move? Ricky, you go ahead on this one.
If you're allowed to play this move, it kind of looks like that you'll go to F7, I think, and do something that is very close to the scholar's mate.
Right. So as well as threatening queen takes f7, which would be a checkmate, this queen is also threatening to take off the rook in the corner. As you guys probably know, that's part of why the queen is such a powerful piece, is that she can create these double attacks. She's acting like a rook on this line, while she's acting like a bishop at the same time on this line and creating a double attack. So black's next move has to be aimed against allowing the queen to get there. And that's bishop here. So far, so good. But there is another line to get close to the king. So now I play my queen to h5. And black has to make a decision. The move h6 wouldn't actually do anything, hitting the knight, because the pawn can never take the knight without the rook falling to the queen in the corner here. So instead, he plays g6. He could play a move like queen d7, but anyways, g6. And now the queen just comes back to g4. So what have I accomplished here by forcing that pawn to come up to g6? Do you know, if you look at light squares and dark squares, can you tell me which squares of blacks have become a little bit weaker now because of the move g6? Anyone new want to take a shot at this? Nathan, you had your hand up on the last one, and then Ricky got to speak. So why don't you go ahead, Nathan, on this one? Do you think black has weakened his light squares or his dark squares?
Dark squares.
Right, because when this pawn was back here on g7, it controlled h6, it controlled f6, but because the queen had to be pushed away, if this knight is able, it would love to get here to e4 and then right up where the king is on the f6 square. And the only place that black's going to be able to go to keep the knight out of both of these squares would be to put the bishop on this square. But with this pawn already here, that leaves this area down around g7 very weak. So let's see how it plays. Incidentally, this is not, it's not enough to say that this is better for white at this point. It's not like that at all. It's more like white is just playing a pawn down, but has really good attacking chances. So that's all we're claiming for white here. So he attacked my knight and I play h4. I'd like to keep my knight in that aggressive position. And h4 also leaves a possibility. If I'm attacking the king, I may not choose to castle over here as white. I may use that h4 move, which is becoming really popular in top level chess now, incidentally, to bring my rook forward to h3 and then across into the attack here somewhere. That's something we do carefully if we don't take that decision lightly because we've chosen to leave our king in the middle of the board, but it's something we look at. Anyone know which computer started to show that h4 can be a really powerful move in all kinds of positions? Anyone know what the most recent popular strong computer has become? Or playing program? So let me know, guys, if any of you have heard of AlphaZero. Anyone?
Oh, I heard of AlphaZero.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think maybe, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, so AlphaZero is an amazing new chess playing program that was developed by Google in London, England, and it's proven to be amazingly strong. It's actually self-taught. All the programmers did was give the computer the rules of the game, and then the computer played 500,000 games, at least, I think almost 500,000 games against itself, which when you're a computer only takes a few hours, and learned everything by learning what was right and what was wrong. It self-taught itself to become a very strong chess playing program. That's a whole new level, what they call artificial intelligence. That's a whole new level now of what we call artificial intelligence. So black is afraid here that white's going to keep pushing through with moves like h5 and tries to stop white himself. We keep our queen in an aggressive attacking position. This f7 square is becoming weak now. And black castles. Okay, so he's protected f7. So far, so good. But now we get to that point we talked about where that h4 move allows this rook to, this is called a rook lift when we go forward this way on a file. And we bring our rook to the third rank and it prepares to join the attack by coming over to the dark square g3 here. And suddenly these squares all around the king start to become kind of suspicious. We have moves like, with the rook out of the way now, we have moves like g4 trying to break those pawns down. So black plays queen to d5, looking for an opportunity to say trade the knight with the bishop first, and then bring the queen into e4 with a check and trade the queens off. Because if he can get the queens off, then my chances of a successful attack become less likely. So I play rook g3. And black tries to continue with that plan. Now, what did we just say? We just said if we take the bishop back with the pawn or the rook, black's going to play queen e4 check and get the queens off the board, and then maybe black's doing okay. So naturally, I don't want a queen trade, and I take with my queen. Okay, can I get someone to speak up and tell me what threat white has in the position now? Okay, Ricky, you've answered lots, and I love that, but I want to see if I can get someone else to speak up. Someone other than Ricky or Nathan.
Queen takes h5.
Okay, so you queen takes h5, right, Max?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you guys all see that? So the rook on g3 pins this pawn against the king down here. So there is a threat to play queen here because that pawn is pinned. Everyone see that? So keep in mind, if you look at black's rating, he's a good player, so he can see these threats coming in. He's trying to do what he can to avoid them. So he puts a check in the way first, putting more protection on his king side. And now I just develop my bishop, block the check. I'm nice and safe. I still have that threat against h5. And now he tries to get the queens off. Now, the same rule we've been following all through the game. If we're on the attack, we want to keep more pieces on because it's harder for black to defend if we have more pieces on the board. And I want you guys to notice now the bishop on c1, the bishop on e2, they're side by side and they're pointing this way towards the king, right? And that area around the king. Bishops like this are very, very powerful. This one controls all the black squares along here. This one controls all the white squares. And black's now fallen a little bit in his attempt to get the queens off the board, has fallen a bit behind in development. Yes, this bishop is good, but it runs along a diagonal that doesn't do anything right now. But this knight is still stuck back. We don't know where the knight's going to end up. This nice little pawn wedge is partly about if the knight, say, were to come to d7, and he'd want to come to f6 next, he can't get there, and he can't get to e5 or c5. So we've definitely got something good going for giving up that one pawn, right? You see the extra pawn that black has here, he's had no time to start advancing these pawns because we keep attacking him. So no, we don't want the queens off, so we play queen h6. We're coming closer to the king. And again, we have threats against this h5 square. We have moves like rook to g5, pushing the queen further away, right? Everyone good with that so far? Any questions? Okay. Sorry, I can't see you guys to know who everybody is, but we will carry on here. So really, black can't do anything. The king can't move now, so black can't do anything to keep the h5 pawn from being taken. Does everyone understand that? With this rook pin against this square, the king would like to get out of the pin, but there's nowhere to move. Kind of boxed in there. So somehow or other, this pawn's going to come off. And that'll make this pawn even closer to the king now. So finally, black gets a piece into play. And the only piece I haven't put into the game is this bishop on c1 yet. So I play to attack the rook. And I'm not really playing to win the rook. I'm playing to bring the bishop all the way down here. And at some point, all the way into this square. So I can try to use the bishop and queen together. If I can get the bishop to f6 without it being taken twice, then I can set up a checkmating pattern with my queen here and my bishop on f6. So my idea is actually to not really trying to win the rook, just trying to position the bishop to look for a checkmate. So black plays here to try to protect this pawn, at least against the bishop, by pinning it to the king. Now, you guys all understand what we call an exchange. If I win the rook for my bishop, then we say that I'm up in exchange, right? It's generally worth, if you look at points, a bishop is worth about 3 and a rook about 5. So I could do that, but really this game is all about getting a winning attack. So I actually am going to ignore that rook because I'm after a bigger prize. I'm after the king. So right now this bishop is pinned, but black's not threatening any checks or any other way to beat me. So instead, with the queen out of the way off this square now, I don't take the rook, I just play bishop to here. And my plan is to go into here. Can everybody see that if I can get my bishop here, see that checkmate is coming on g7 or h8? Everybody good with that? And even if the knight were to take the bishop, and I take back with the pawn, I still have the same threat of a checkmate on g7, even if I end up with a pawn on f6. So I don't mind if the bishop gets taken once, I just don't want it taken twice, which is why when this queen came from f5 to e4, it gave me the chance to stick the bishop there because the queen is no longer able to take on this square either. So we have bishop e7, queen f5 again, trying to keep the bishop from coming here, because now after knight takes, pawn takes, now the queen could take. But again, I'm not interested in winning that rook. I'm interested in trying to get a winning attack. So I just take on h5. And everybody remembers that this can't be taken by the pawn or the queen because of the pin along this file. So now we have all of our pieces in the attack, and that's so important. I'm attacking with a rook, 2 bishops, and a queen. And the only real defender at this point is black's queen. So black's trying to hold that king position together with a queen against a lone queen against rook, queen, bishop, and bishop. So you can pretty much predict that bad things are going to happen now, right? So the queen gives a check once more. This time I don't want to return with the bishop because the bishop is part of the attack. So I just sidestep with my king. Now keep in mind, guys, you're taught things like castle early, get your king to safety. So this comes with more advanced play when you know when you can get away with doing this sort of thing. But in most situations, you would do exactly what you're taught. You would get castled early. But here we're saying my attack is fast enough that I'm willing to leave my king out in the middle as long as it can't keep getting checked. And I will be able to win the game. So the queen comes back to f5 once more, again, trying to keep the bishop from getting in here. So for example, it wouldn't help me to play bishop here because after knight takes with the queen there and pawn takes, this queen gets back just in time. But it's probably, honestly, it's probably even lost here because bishop takes pawn is a huge move. And if pawn takes, then rook check will win the queen. So I'll show you this. So even this probably wouldn't save black, but that's what black's trying to do anyways. And after this, white is winning pretty easily anyways. However, we'll go back to this position where he's trying once more to hold it all together. And I just played here. And the queen can no longer stay on a square anywhere that will stop the bishop from getting into here. There's no check here because the rook protects this way. There's no queen e4 trying to go checkmate on this side because the rook protects this way. So this rook is actually doing amazing things. It's defending g2 against attacks. It's defending d3 against checks. And it's part of the attack against the black king. And actually, black resigned at this point. So let's just play some kind of move. Let's just put the queen here to a safe square. Well, then what we talked about happens. There's no checks coming. So all I do is I play bishop here. I'm threatening two different checkmates with the queen. And after knight takes bishop, pawn takes, there's no way for black to get any pieces back to stop queen to g7 mate. Everybody see that? Good? Ricky, you good? I got to scroll down and see you guys here. Question for Sean if he's still. Okay, Sean, quick question. So when they put their hand up, if they're scrolled further down, will that come up to the top? Maybe Sean's not there. Okay. So that's to give you guys an idea that if you.
Sorry, I just come back. Oh, what's your
okay.
question? Sorry.
So if somebody does put their hand up like Nathan did that other time, even if they're hidden from my view, will that pop to the top where I can see the hand?
Okay.
I'm asking, is that how that would work?
Yeah, actually, that's on us the lower hand and the hand. If they raise hand, the hand will be always there.
So that'll pop that person to the top of the list,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's
Okay,
right.
good.
Yeah.
So did you guys like that game?
Yeah,
That's why some players play very carefully and they fight to hold on to their equal part of the center of the board and don't make a trade like in this position. They'll play a move like e6. They won't try to take in the center, or sorry, to take away from the center, because once the other side gets all these control of the center and all these open lines, sometimes very bad things can happen. But black can play this way, so that shouldn't be misunderstood. Black could play the way he did in the game and still survive this, but he just has to be very, very careful.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to talk to this kid. If it's possible, can you just turn on your video and Jim can see you and you have.
Yeah, I would like that if I could see you guys. So.
Yeah. So if you guys don't mind, just turn on your video. Yeah, thank you. Maybe
and then I will encourage you to speak up when,
maybe
again, the way we learn, we don't worry about if we get a wrong answer. Nobody's judging anyone. We're learning by testing what we think we know. And then we try to work out if an answer, it's not even really a wrong answer. It's just a way of working out what we know and trying to get better at what we know. So any more brave people put their videos on? No. Sorry, Sean, they're all shy today except for Ricky.
Yeah, maybe later I will tell. Yeah,
maybe later.
Thank you. Look, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to look for. I'm going to look for another game here for a second. I'm going to stop the share. I think we're going to do a couple of different things today, so there's not going to be that much time. Just give me a second to take this off. Did Roy do some end game work with you guys in these first few sessions or not? Did you guys discuss end games at all?
Roy talked about the end game during summertime, but this kids is not exactly same kids as that one. So some of them has already gone through some end game before, but yeah, it's just
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull up. Just give me a second to look at something here. I'm going to go back to my.
I believe that Roy didn't teach much like advanced end game skill. It's just
Okay, I'm going to actually do some more basic end game stuff. I've got some material for that. And I'm going to start with, let me just see if I can find it here. Okay, let me share this. Which one is this? Okay, let's try this one. Okay, did Roy discuss rook endings with you guys at all? Anyone want to tell me?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'm going to go through this one slowly. It's a little bit complicated, but not too bad. If we take it slowly, and if you guys want me to slow down, I will. I just want to make sure that we have try to get a sense of what people can know or not know. So in this, okay, can everyone see my screen first of all? The position in front of you?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So in this position, white is close to queening the pawn, but as soon as the rook moves somewhere, this pawn will fall, and then it's hard for white to win the game, right? But I want you guys to picture that if this rook were able to move with a check, like let's say there wasn't a black pawn on b7, if he was able to give a check here, which is a tempo against the king, then that h7 pawn could promote to a queen, right? So what we're going to try to do in this position is we're going to try to get this king out of his little, it's like trying to get a rabbit out of its hole so you can have rabbit stew for supper, okay? We're going to try to get this king out of its hole somehow so that we can check it from behind, and then this pawn can promote to a queen with that extra check tempo. Then we can push the pawn and make a queen. So let's start with this move and discuss where we think the king. I'm going to put this on to training. Okay. If this king wants to avoid getting checked, can you guys suggest a square that it might go to?
B5.
Okay, that would be a good choice. So we'll put the king on b5. Now, remember we said that the rook would like to get behind here with a check, and right now there's no check to be had, right? So what move could white play now to try to get that pawn out of the way or try to get the king onto a check square? Anyone want to suggest the way? Evan, go ahead.
C6.
C6. Can you guys all see the problem for black here? If we take with the pawn, then there's a check from behind, rook check, and then this pawn becomes a queen. If we take with the king, there's a check on c8, and we get a queen. So is black lost, or does he have a way to save this? Anyone want to make a suggestion? I want to see if I can get somebody other.
I know.
Ricky, you haven't answered for a while, so go ahead.
Is it just going back to B6?
To which square?
going back to D6.
with the king, right?
Yeah.
Do you guys understand why that move could save black now? It's an odd looking move, isn't it? But it's actually the move that could save him from losing the game. Because if white takes the pawn now, then the king takes and there's no check from in behind. Right? And if white tries to push past with the pawn, black just takes it and there's no check from behind. So what else could white do? Anyone want to make a suggestion? Okay. How about Brighton? Brighton, do you have something you want to offer? Go ahead and unmute.
I just had trouble unmuting for a second.
That's okay. Any idea what white might try to do here to try to keep those threats alive?
Maybe B5.
Very good. B5 is a good move because if black were to take the B5 pawn, then we play either C takes B7 or we just play C7 and our pawn is going through to a queen on this side. And we have the same problem. We can't take this pawn with the pawn or we get checked from behind. So, does black still have a waiting move or is black out of waiting moves? Okay, Evan, go ahead.
Can't the rook just move up?
Right, so let's move the rook to the file. May as well pin that pawn, right? So, does this save the game? Or is there still something white can do to make this work? Okay, Luke, go ahead.
Maybe you can just take the pawn and then you can promote, I guess.
Okay, so white can't take the pawn because the black rook moved to a square that pins the pawn, right? So do you want to try again, see what else?
Are
Maybe
you saying the black rook is pinning his own king?
Oh, sorry, my bad. I've had a long day on Zoom too, so. Okay, so if white takes here, now we got our king to that safe square again. Remember we said the idea was we don't want the rook to check from behind, right?
Mhm.
So really, all white could do at that point would be to play here and hope that the king takes. But if he doesn't, maybe we can't win. So these are some of the ideas about breakthroughs. I'm going to show you a slightly different one. And we'll go back and try it. Except what I'm going to take it off training for a minute though, and I'm going to see if there's another line we should look at. Okay, so we had C6 check way back, or C5 check way back there. Okay. So King G4 was another try, but let's do the C5 check. And now let's put the king back this way instead of going up the board. We managed to hold on, but just barely. So if you're white now, the king is in a safe spot, but you'd like to pop him out of there again. We can try the same idea with C6, right? Oh, sorry. we could try the same idea. Or we could try even b5. So now there's ways to get the king out of the way. And for example, if we were to give this rook just a pass move like this, can anyone tell me after b6 check what the outcome should be? Evan, go ahead.
The king moves to d7.
Okay, but what should the outcome of the game be now? Is black holding or is black losing?
Seems he's winning.
Sorry, white's winning? Did you say?
It seems like black. It seems like black is winning.
Black is winning. After king d7, right?
Yeah.
Actually, white's winning now, but this will show another thing that we learn about in these positions. One other trick in the positions, which is why the king always tries to stay close to one corner of the board. Can anyone tell me the move white can play that'll win the game now? Okay, Ricky, you answered just recently. I'll look for someone else. Nathan, you answered. Luke. Luke, why don't you answer this one? How is
so
white winning now?
C6. C6.
What's that?
So if the C6.
Yeah, c6 is a good possibility, right?
Yeah.
Because if pawn takes pawn, like c6, pawn takes pawn, then this pawn is going to push through to a queen. But I do want to show you one other way to win, and I want to see if somebody else wants to answer. Johnny, why don't you see, is there another way for white to win too? Because we want to show one other theme here as well.
Rook b8.
Very good. So this is the other thing you need to know, and this is why we try to keep our king close to the corner of the board when we're defending these endgames. The rook can come to b8, hitting the pawn. And after rook takes pawn, we're going to give a check and win the rook over here. What do we call this when we win something behind, like we give the king a check and win something behind? Do you know what we call this tactic? There's probably more than one name, but there's a common one we use. Anyone? Nathan, is your hand still up from before, or did you want to answer this one?
I want to answer this one.
Go ahead, please.
Called the skewer.
Yep, called a skewer. Very good. When we food, a skewer is a long thing that we put different things on. We put meats and potatoes and stuff and peppers. So
In the barbecue.
Yep. So this is an important tactical idea to know called a skewer. Because of this problem of running into this skewer, it's important to note that we try to keep the king in around these squares here, these two squares especially, when we're trying to hold an end game like this. If we were to get rid of all of these pawns and just have the king here, it would want to sit on this square or this square back and forth so that it can't get skewered from behind. The moment it starts to come towards the pawn, that's a mistake some players make. They'll have their king here, let's say. I don't know if I'm on the move or off the move. Let's see, I'm off the move. So let's just put the king here. If we start coming towards the pawn thinking we're going to save it, then suddenly, as soon as we start to get close to the pawn, you get this skewer again. So that's why it's important when you're behind the pawn protecting that your king stays close over here. So let's put him here for a second. I want to ignore the queenside pawns for one moment and just tell you that the reason, if it's only this pawn, that we can always draw when it's this far forward is as the king comes forward. So we go, okay, so we'll give white the move. King comes forward. Let's ignore these pawns for a moment. And the rook comes up and the king comes forward. And what we do is we start, because there's not room for the king to run around the pawn, we start checking him. I don't know if Roy did this one with you guys or not. And the king runs away. We can do whatever we want. We can move our rook back. Well, actually, no, sorry, we can't move our rook back. So we go here again. The king comes closer to the pawn, so the rook can move away, and we just check the king again. And the king has nowhere to hide around the pawn. So in these positions where we can get our rook behind the passed pawn, we have a much better chance of drawing the game than if it's the other way around. You have to imagine that every move forward that this pawn makes leaves this rook less room to move what's in front of it. And in the meantime, the rook that's behind it gets more and more room to move. Does that make sense? Okay, let's do one more. I'm just going to go back, stop the share for a sec, look at something else we can do quickly. And then we will call it a day, and I'll have time to talk to Roy and figure out what material we might look at going forward from there. So let me have a look here. Okay. I'm just going to take a position from a game that we can work on a little bit. And where are we here? And I'm immediately going to go to training. Okay. Black's last move was bishop c6. Okay. Threatening the bishop on e4. And white played rook to here. And you can see the big
You
oops
don't have
sign
a
that I
screen
put
share.
on the board there. Can somebody help me to understand why this move is a blunder? It's not very obvious, but it's a
You
nice
don't
theme
have
to
a
know.
screen
You're
share.
not. You're
Oh,
not
sorry, I
sharing
didn't
your
get to
screen.
the share yet. Okay, let me go back and move. Hang on a sec. Sorry about that. Okay, my bad. Haven't done this for a little while, guys, so if you're patient with me, that'll help. Let me just get this up again. And share screen. This one and this one. You guys know that old people are slow at this stuff, right? We're not bright and young like you guys. We did different things, like weird things like play outside with our friends when we were little. So anyways, you can see it now, right?
Actually, you did much better than Roy. Roy is worse than you.
Yeah, Roy's even older than me, so I feel pretty good about that. Okay, can you guys all see it now? Yes?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Last move was rook e1, protecting the bishop on e4. Chess sometimes looks a little bit like geometry in the way files and angles, like the bishops, the way they coordinate. So can somebody see a problem with the move rook e1? There's a way to kind of overload everything and win some material. But I'm wondering if anyone can see it here. This one's a little bit complicated, but I want to take our time on it. So the problem here for white is that if the rook can be driven away, then the bishop can take this with check. So Ricky, do you have a thought here?
Is it the pawn moving to move, like the pawn on F?
Can you see a problem with it, Ricky? If this pawn moves away, what is the problem?
Um,
Can you can you see,
Doctor?
can you see how the queen on E7 would fall?
Yes.
Right, so that's no good, right? But a good try. But unfortunately, this pawn is pinned by this queen against the queen on E7. But that's a good try. Anyone else? Let me ask the question a different way, because this one's a little bit complicated, but it's a really cool idea once you see it. If we wanted to fork White's rook once we took here, if this is a check and we wanted to fork White's rook, where would we want White's rook to be? Go ahead, Evan. Evan, are you muted?
You didn't call on me, so I assume I couldn't talk.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Rook B1.
Beautiful, right? Check this out, guys. Once you sort of get a sense of what's happening, you realize that this is a beautiful move. And what do I say in my notes? I love geometry because it is sort of like triangles and angles that go every way. We forced this rook to a very bad square. And if the rook takes here, White is up a rook for one move, right? White would be up a whole rook for one move, but then bishop takes E4 as a check. So we just won a bishop, and next move we're going to win a rook, and we're going to be ahead a whole piece, right? Now, if the king would, this would be even better. This came from a real game that I played, but this would even be better if the king was back on H1, because then even the rook on E1 couldn't move forward because it would be pinned against the king. But as it was, White was able to play this move and still hold the bishop for now, it appears. But what we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of that pin, the bishop against the king here, for one more move. Can you guys see what we can do because the rook went to a dark square here? A good move for black now, taking advantage of the fact that this bishop is pinned. Okay, Evan, you got the last one. I want to give someone else a chance, and if no one else, okay, Max, go ahead, unmute yourself. Max, are you there? Can't
yeah.
hear you, Max.
Yeah,
Not
sorry,
sure why.
sorry.
There
My
you go.
mic was unplugged. Knight F5.
Very good. Can you guys all see this? Because this bishop is pinned, it can only move along here. It can't move other ways. Now we have the beautiful move knight F5, taking advantage of that pin for one more move. And we hit White's queen as well as White's rook. So we're going to win a knight for a rook as well. So the rook can no longer stop everything. So I think that was the one I wanted to finish up on, guys. It's a really cool idea. These are more advanced tactics, so we may only do them once in a lesson, but we'll go slowly through them so you guys can make your brains hurt. And I think you have to go now to Lichess. Am I right, Sean?
Yes, the tournament will start in 2 minutes. That's,
Okay, so thank you guys. We'll have something more organized for next time. This happened on pretty short notice with Roy getting a shift change. So I think I'm going to be your instructor on Tuesdays. Is that right, Sean, for the next little while?
Every Tuesday.
Okay,
yeah.
and I'll sit down with Sean and we'll work out the best lesson plan to go. But just keep in mind, if you guys can participate, we have a lot more fun because I like doing good, challenging, fun things. So, and thank you everybody for being so attentive, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Have fun in the tournament.
Thank
Bye.
you very much.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
See you guys. Have fun. So do they go to a different room here now?